We begin in the Gemara today on Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. The Gemara here brought the machlokes of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding Chatzi Shir. Rabbi Yochanan says that Chatzi Shir is Asur min HaTorah, and Reish Lakish says that Chatzi Shir is Mutar min HaTorah. But then the Gemara explained that even according to Reish Lakish, although it's Mutar min HaTorah, but Midrabanan it's still Asur. And that's the meaning of our Mishnah when it says Yoma Kippurim Asur b'Achilu u'b'Shtiyah. Both according to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, the term Asur refers to Chatzi Shir, and there's no Chiyuv Kares. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's Asur min HaTorah. According to Reish Lakish, it's Asur midrabanan. So now, the next piece of the Gemara will be discussing and asking a question on Reish Lakish's opinion that we explained that even a Chatzi Shir is Asur midrabanan. So the Gemara asks on this, Ihachi, if Reish Lakish agrees that a Chatzi Shir is Asur midrabanan, loy nechayev aleha karbon shvuah. You should not be obligated a karbon shvuah if you made a shvuah not to eat a half a shir. So, as Rashi explains what the basis of this Gemara is. The Gemara in shvuah says that when a person makes a shvuah, in general there's a concept of shvuah as bitui. That's number one. When a person makes a shvuah, I will eat, I will not eat, and he breaks his shvuah, so he has to bring a carbon for breaking the shvuah. But a shvuah does not take effect if the shvuah was regarding something which is anyways a mitzvah min HaTorah. If you make a shvuah to eat matzah and you didn't eat matzah, you're not over on the isser of not eating and not fulfilling your shvuah because it's your mushba v'oimid. Your shvuah does not take effect on this if the shvuah is already before from Har Sinai that you must eat the matzah. And the same thing also applies in the negative. If you make a shvuah, I will not eat something which is not kosher, something which is treifus, nevelis, the shvuah does not take effect because you're already commanded from Har Sinai, and there's an oath that you took by Har Sinai not to eat that. So now if so, the question is, how about if a person made a shvuah not to eat a half a shir? Will the shvuah take effect or not? So seemingly this is the whole, connected to the whole discussion over here. Is there a isur min HaTorah regarding a half a shir? So according to what we just said, Rabbi Yochanan certainly holds a half a shir is asur min HaTorah, so the shvuah should not take effect on a half a shir either. Now, even according to Reish Lakish, we just said that even though he holds that a Chatzi Shir is mutar min HaTorah, but it's asur midrabanan. So if it's asur midrabanan, the shvuah that he makes not to eat a half a shir shouldn't take effect either. So that's the basis of this Gemara, as we'll see. So that Gemara first quotes the Mishnah where there's a machlokes regarding a person making a shvuah not to eat, and then we'll come back to this point. Why did we learn in the Mishnah? It says there, shvuah shaloi eichel. Person makes a shvuah that he's not going to eat food. V'achal, and he ate, but what did he eat? Nevelis, treifus, shkotzim, urimasim. He ate various different foods that are not kosher. Chayiv. According to the Tanakama, he's still going to be chayiv for breaking the shvuah and eating. Rab Shimon, paiter. Rab Shimon says he'll be pater. So the question was asked on this machlokes here, and specifically on the opinion of the Tanakama. Amai chayiv. Why does the Tanakama say that he's chayiv for breaking the shvuah? Mushba v'oimed mahar sinayu. He is already the shvuah, as I mentioned before, this concept. Mushba v'oimed mahar sinai means he's already taken an oath from Har Sinai not to eat anything which is not kosher. So if he made a shvuah and he did not to eat, and he ate nevelis and treifus and shkotzim urimasim, on that the shvuah did not take effect at all. So why would the Tanakama say that he should be chayiv if he ate any of those things? So on this, there were two answers given to explain the machlokes of the Tanakama and Rab Shimon. Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, the Omri, they said, "B'kailol dvarim amutarim im dvarim asurim." The reason why this shvuah takes effect is because, what was his shvuah? His shvuah was he's not going to eat. As Rashi here says, for example, he made a shvuah, I'm not going to eat any meat. Not basa shchuta, not basa nevela, which means not kosher meat, not non-kosher meat. So because he includes in one shvuah both together, so the shvuah that he made on basa shchuta took effect. So together, if you include together with that shvuah that took effect for kosher meat, the non-kosher meat, the shvuah takes effect on everything, even on what you were already mushba v'oimed mahar sinai, not to eat. And therefore, if you're going to eat nevelis, treifus, and so on, the shvuah took effect on that as well, and you're going to be chayav according to the Tanakama. That was the pshat of these Amiroim here. Which basically then means that the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rab Shimon is regarding this concept. could the shvuah take effect on something which is aser if you include it together with something which is mutter? The Tanna Kama holds of this concept of kailel, because you included it together, it takes effect. And Rab Shimon disagrees. Rab Shimon says even if you include something which is aser together, which is something which is mutter, it does not take effect. You're mushba v'oimid mahar Sinai. On what's mutter, the shvuah took effect. On what's aser, the shvuah did not take effect. That's the first pshat. Reish Lakish has another pshat. Reish Lakish is basically going to say that the only time the veilus and treifus and so on, the shvuah could take effect is if it's a chatzi shir. By a chatzi shir, since there's no isser minat teira, so you're not mushba vayimid mahar Sinai, so your shvuah could take effect. And that was the machlokes of the Tanna Kama and Rab Shimon, as we'll see. But now, how exactly this shvuah was made in order for it to be only on a half a shir, so Reish Lakish explains that this will depend on a different machlokes between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Akiva in another place regarding when a person makes a shvuah, I will not eat. How do you interpret a shvuah when a person makes a shvuah, I will not eat? What amount is that? I will not eat. So the Tanna Kama, or actually the Rabbanon, as the Gemara quotes it here, they say when a person makes a shvuah, I will not eat. What does that mean? A kazayas. Achila is a kazayas. Less than a kazayas is not what he meant in the shvuah. According to Rabbi Akiva, when a person makes a shvuah that he will not eat, and he doesn't specify an amount, that includes the most minute amount, even less than a kazayas, a kol shehu, that's included in his shvuah. So now based on this, Reish Lakish explains how we apply this case over here of a person making a shvuah, I will not eat, and it's less than the shir of a kazayas. So you will not find over here an explanation for this machlokes, and to explain according to the Tanna Kama why the shvuah takes effect, although it's something which was already forbidden from before, ella, only in the following way. Either b'mefaresh chatzi shir, if the person specified clearly that my shvuah is for a chatzi shir, I'm making a shvuah not to eat a half a share of food, even less than a kazayas. Va'aliba de Rabbanon, and that's according to the Rabbanon. So even though he made a shvuah that he's not going to eat a half a share of something which is asab from anyways, from Har Sinai, but because it's a half a share, so according to the Shlakish, there's no isser on a half a share. So in that, the shvuah takes effect. This follows the Rabbanah's opinion that only if he's mefarish, if he specifies clearly a half a shear, the shvuah will take place on a half a shear. Or bistam, if a person makes a shvuah, he will not eat basa nevela, and he doesn't specify an amount, it'll include less than a shear, it'll include even a kol shehu. And according to Rabbi Akiva, the Amad that says, Adam oisa atzmai b'kol shehu. When a person makes a shvuah stam that I will not eat, that includes either a kol shehu. So the point is, what do we see here in Reish Lakish's opinion? Reish Lakish here is saying that a chatzi shir is mutter minat Torah, and therefore the shvuah that the person now makes not to eat from this chatzi shir takes effect. And we can't say that it's already also from before, that he's mushba v'oimid mahar Sinai. So, but if what we said before is true, that according to Reish Lakish, even he agrees that a chatzi shir is asam midrabanan, so as Rashi here brings, if it's an isam midrabanan, he's mushba v'oimid mahar Sinai, because there's a lav of leisasur. All isurim midrabanan are based on the lav of leisasur, that you must listen to what the Rabbanan say. So he is mushba v'oimid mahar Sinai, even according to Reish Lakish, on a half a shear. So how is Reish Lakish here saying that regarding a half a shear, the shvuah will take effect? Now if you're going to argue and say, Kivin the Islay hetem minatayra, that since this is something which is only asam minatayra, midrabana that is, but minatayra it's mutter, so therefore kachayil carbon shvuah. So therefore the shvuah could take effect on this, and he will be chayav a carbon shvuah. So maybe we'll argue and say, no, the lav of leisaser is not a lav that prevents of the shvuah of taking effect. Only a ism and atayre do I use the rule of mushba v'oimid mahar Sinai, but not regarding a ism and rabbanon, and therefore the shvuah will take effect. If I'm going to argue and say that, the Gemara says, no, but I have another Mishnah that proves that even by a ism and rabbanon, it's the same as the ism and atayre. But Tanan, there's another Mishnah where it says, Shvuah sa'edos, the halacha of a shvuah sa'edos, which refers to a person that makes a shvuah. I don't know any testimony for you on this subject. And he does. So if a person makes a shvuah sa'edos and a shvuah sheker, so he's chayiv in that as well. So the Mishnah there says, Eina neheges ella b'ru'uyin lahoid. So the isra of shvuah sa'edos is only in a case where it's a person that could have said edos. That's the Mishnah. Now, as Rashi here quotes, in the beginning of that Mishnah, it clearly spells out that the Isser of Shvuas Ha'edus is only by men, not by women that are not Roi Lahoid, only by a person that's not a Korev. Krevim are Psulim, so they can't, there's no Edus for them, so there's no Isser of making a Shvuah that I can't say Edus for you. And then the Mishnah concludes with this saying over here, Ein Heges Elo but Uri Uyin Lahoid. So this seems to be extra. What is this coming to say? The question was asked on this. What is this coming to exclude? What else is it adding here? Rav Papa said, Lemutim Melech. It comes to exclude a king. Where the halach is a king, as Rashi brings, a king cannot say Eidus, so he as well is not Chayav in Shvuas Eidus. Rav Yaakov said, Lemu'ute Mesachek Bekuvya. This comes to say that a person that's gambling, which midrabanan is aser to say eidus, we don't accept his eidus, that is, so he as well is not going to be chayav and shvuas eidus. So the Gemara spells out, v'hamesachik bekovya, midiraisa mechsik chavzi. Person that gambles, so minat teire, he's fit to say eidus. It's only ism midrabanan, right? The ism minat teire is only a gazlan. This person is not really a gazlan, minat teire. So therefore could say Eidus Minat Teire, v'Rabbanan u'du pasluhu v'loika chayla le'ashvua. And over there I say that the Isser of Shvuas Eidus, since midrabanan he can't say Eidus, so therefore the Shvuah that I will not say Eidus is not an Isser for him, does not take effect for him. So therefore I can say, from here I see the same thing regarding the Shvuah's bitui. When a person makes a Shvuah, I will not eat. So if it's something which is already Asam midrabanan, the Shvuah should not take effect. So even if it's something which is a chatzi shir, the shvuah should not take effect. If what we're saying before is true, that according to Rish Lakish, he agrees that chatzi shir is also midrabanan. So therefore the question remains, how does Rish Lakish say that the shvuah takes effect, at least according to the Tana Kama, on the chatzi shir? Rashi before points out that according to Rab Shimon, even for a kol shehu yemushba v'ayimid mahar Sinai. So we're not discussing Rab Shimon's opinion. Okay, so the Gemara answers and now explains, no. The raya that we just brought from Shvuas Ha'edus is not a raya. Shani Hasam, there's a reason why the Shvuas Ha'edus does not take effect even if he's only pasam midrabanan. The Amakra, because there the Torah says, Im lo yagid, if he will not say the Eidus that he could say, then he's chayav for Shvuas Ha'edus. V'hai lav baragadu hu klal. This individual is not someone that could say any Eidus. Whether minat Torah, whether midrabanan, the fact is that now this person's Eidus is not accepted. So if it's not accepted, you can't say regarding him that he could have said Eidus and he came and lied that I have no Eidus. The fact is he can't say Eidus, and therefore there's no Isser over here for him saying a Shvuah that I can't say Eidus. So that's regarding the Shvuas Ha'edus. However, regarding our case that we were speaking about, which is something which is only Asam midrabanan, on that the Shvuah does take effect. The concept of Mushba v'Oimid Mahar Sinai is only regarding something which is Asam minat Torah, not regarding something which is Asar midrabanan. So that seems to be the basis of the Gemara's discussion over here, whether a Issa midrabanan, could you apply to that the rule of Mushba v'Oimid Mahar Sinai, and therefore the Shvuah cannot take effect? And the conclusion of the Gemara now is that it could take effect, and there's no raya from the case of Shvuas Ha'edus. Now the Gemara goes back to the original diuk that we had in the Mishnah, where it said the term Aser, and it does not say that it's Chayiv Koros. And therefore we said that the Mishnah is speaking about a Chatzi Shir, which is only Aser. The Gemara asks on that, V'chol heiche, the Tani Anish Koris, or the Bach takes out the word the Tani. The Bach says, we read, V'chol heiche the Anish Koris. Is it true that in any case we have an Isser that there's an Anish of Koris, Leitani Aser? The Tana doesn't use the term Aser, it uses the term Anish Koris. But Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa regarding our Mishnah, Afapi Sha'amru Aser Bekulan, even though it says regarding all the 5 things mentioned in the Mishnah, the 5 Inuyim, that it's all Aser, Le'amru Anish Koris. However, the Einish of Kares is only Ela ala Eichel v'Shaise, only someone that eats, drinks on Yom Kippur, v'Oise Malacha, or someone that does Malacha on Yom Kippur Bilvad. So we see here, in this Braise, it uses the term Aser regarding Achila Shtiyah. So why are we saying that the Tana does not use the term Aser regarding Achila Shtiyah? So the Gemara answers, Hachi Kama, this is how you have to read this Braise. Kesha amru asr, when it says in the Mishnah the term asr regarding achilu shtiyah, lo amru ela b'kechatzi shir. The Tana is using that term of asr because he's speaking about a chatzi shir, like we explained before. Aval kashir, if you eat a full shir, onish kares, then you are going to be chayav kares. Then the Tana of the Braisa continues to explain, va'afal pisha onish kares, even though if it's a full shir you are chayav kares, ein onish kares, elo echol v'shaise v'aisem malacha bulvat. The chiyuv of kares is only for eating and drinking Yom Kippur or doing malacha. That's how you read this Braisa in relation to the explanation of our Mishnah. So we can still say that the term of asr is only used if there's no einish kares. Now the Gemara gives a different answer on this original question regarding the term asr used in our Mishnah. Or I can give you another answer. Ki katani asr, when it says in the Mishnah the term asr, ashara, it's going on the other things mentioned in the Mishnah. It doesn't refer to achilu shtiyah. Achilu shtiyah, you're right, that's a chiyuv of kares, and the Tana wouldn't use the term asr. The term asr refers to the other things mentioned in the Mishnah, rechitze, sicha, nilas asandal, tashmish amita, where there is no einish kares. On that it says the term of asr. And the Gemara brings the source for this. The Tana Rabba v'Rav Yosef. Rabba and Rav Yosef learned Bishar, Sifri, the Beirav, and the Braises that Rav taught. Minayin liyom kippurim she'asa b'rechitze b'siche b'nis asandal b'tashmish amita. The other things that are asa that the Mishnah mentioned. What's the source for them? Talmud Loima, the pasuk says when it speaks about v'nisim esnafshei seichem, so it adds there. It says shabasin. Shabasin says shvais, that you should seize. You should add other things also to the V'inisa. As Rashi explains, just like in the Torah regarding the Issa of Shabbos, when it adds the word Shabbosin, that's the source for the other malachas, that we know that it's Asr, even those things that are not actually, even malachas that are not written by the Mishkan. There's also a Issa of Shabbosin, additional things that are Asr. So to here, when the Torah writes the term Shabbosin regarding the Inui of not eating and drinking, Shabbosin tells me to add other things as well. But we're adding them only for an Isser, but not for the Einish of Kares. And that's what the Tana meant when it said Asr. It referred to the other things where there is no Einish of Kares. Now the Gemara comes back to the very argument itself regarding the inyan of Chatzi Shir. Guf Chatzi Shir, Rabbi Yechanan Oma Asam Min HaTorah. Rabbi Yechanan says even a Chatzi Shir is forbidden Min HaTorah. Rish Lakish Amar, Rish Lakish says, Mutter min ha-Torah, a Chatzi Shir is allowed min ha-Torah. So the Gemara now explains the basis of their argument. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, Asam min ha-Torah, that the reason why it's Asam min ha-Torah, Kivin the Chazil Tarufi, since a half a shear is fit to be combined to another half, if he adds the full shear, Isura ka'achol. So therefore he's eating a Isser. If the Torah asks us to eat this, even though it gives a shear of, for example, a kazayas, but once he does a half a shear, it combines to the other half. The very fact if he does the full shear shows that this is asr. This is a svara that Rabbi Yechanan says. There's actually a famous machlekes regarding this svara of chazil tarufi, what this means. Many achreinim say, the Prima Godim and others say, that the pshat of chazil tarufi, he's actually saying, because this is the actual reason why it is Asr. Because if you're going to be eating another half, you will be completing the Isser. That is the sibah why when you eat the first half, it's Asr. So that's one pshat. Another pshat is, it's not a sibah. This is just a sign for the fact that when the Torah asers, it really meant to aser even half. It's saying that the einish is only on a full half, on the full amount that is. But even if you only ate a half, it's also Asr. It's just a similar davar that the half is also. So for example, if a person eats a half a shear right before the end of the zman, and he can't actually be mitzaref another half because it's going to be after the zman, is it going to be us according to Rabbi Yechanan for chatzi shear? Does it have to actually be a situation of chazil tarufi, or just the very fact that potentially it could be chazil tarufi? So that's a sign for the fact that this is something which the Torah meant to aser as well. That's the machlekes of how you explain this inyan of chazil tarufi. According to Taisvis, it seems that that really this inyan over here of chatzi shir according to Rabbi Yechanan is learned from a pasuk kol chaylev, which the Gemara will prove soon. The only reason he's bringing over here this svara of chazil tarufi is because that drasha, without this svara, you may have said is just an asmachta, it's not a real drasha. So therefore he brings this svara here of chazil tarufi. But after we have the drasha later, according to Rabbi Yechanan, the concept of chatzi shir is really learned from a pasuk. Just to point out another famous machlokes regarding the concept of chatzi shir asar according to Rabbi Yochanan. The many poskim say, the Chacham Tzvi is the famous one that says this, and others speak about it as well, that the concept of chatzi shir that's asam in atayre is only regarding matters of achila shtiyah, not regarding other isurim. Others disagree with him. The Alter Rebbe quotes this in a Kuntras Achron and also seemingly agrees to his opinion that chatzi shir is only regarding isurim in atayre that are regarding achila shtiyah. Shlokish Amar, Shlokish says, Mutam in Atayra. A chatzi shir is mutam in Atayra. Why? Achila Omer Achmana. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat. And Veleke, whenever the Torah says the term achila, what's the definition of achila? To eat a kazayas. Less than a kazayas, it's not defined as achila b'chlal. It's not an act of eating. So therefore there's no isser even for a chatzi shir. Eis for Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asks Rish Lakish from the following brayso where it says, Ein li ela kol sheyeshna ba'inish. So this brayso is speaking about the isser of chaylev. So I would think that the isser of chaylev is only in a case where the einish for chaylev applies, and then yeshna ba'azhara. So then the isser applies. Koi, how about the chaylev of a koi? So a koi is a suffix. What it is, if it's a suffix, if it's a chaya, if it's a behemoth, it's a suffix. If there's any isser of chaylev for it, which the isser of chaylev is from the chaylev of a behemoth, so it's a suffix over here. What this existence of a koi is, so therefore I would think that that's not included in the isser of chaylev, or the chatzi shir. A half a shir, if less than a kazayis of chaylev as well, hoyel ve'ena ba'einish. So since in both of these cases there is no einish, yachal eina ba'asara, I would think that the isser does not apply either. Talmud Loimar, so the Torah by chaylev says kol chaylev. So kol chaylev adds and says even for a koi is also going to be aser min Torah, and also for a chatzi shir is aser min Torah. So this seems to be a clear braisa like Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. So the Gemara answers, no, midrabanan. According to Rish Lakish, the whole thing is only midrabanan. A koi or a chatzi shir is only also midrabanan. Ukra asmachta ba'alma. The brayse that brings the pasuk is just bringing you a pasuk as an asmachta, but it's not really the source of an isser. Hochanami mistavre. Now the Gemara says it's logical to say that this is the case, that it's only midrabanan. If you're going to say that this brayse is coming to tell me that there's an isser of chaylev minat Torah for the koi sveikuhu. What's a koi? A koi is a suffix chaya, suffix behemoth, so it's a suffix. It's the kral asuyas feike. Do you need a pasuk to come and teach me that if it's a suffix it would be awesome minat Torah? It's obvious. If it's a suffix, it should be awesome minat Torah. So therefore, it must be that the Braisa is coming to say over here an Isser midrabanan. And the Gemara will explain that a koi is really a min for itself. Let's see. Imishum ha. So the Gemara says, no. If this is your raya, that the koi that it speaks about over here is Asr, only midrabanan. Because for a sveike, you don't need any raya, and therefore the chatzi shir is also only with the rabbanon. If that's your raya, lo yirya. It's not a raya. Why not? Because kasavri, they held, the Tana of this brayso holds, koi beria b'fnei atzmahi. A koi is a beria for itself. And since it's a beria for itself, you do need a pasuk to aser it minat Torah. It's not a chaya, it's not a behemah, it's totally it's totally an entity for itself. And therefore you need a special pasuk of kol chaylev to tell me that even a koi, the chaylev of the koi will be yasser. That's so therefore it could be that the Braisa is speaking about it isam minat Torah. The Gemara brings a raya to this point as well, that the koi is a barrier for itself. If you're not going to say that the koi is not a suffix, chaya or behemoth, it's just a new creature for itself. Ravidi Baravin says regarding the Isser of Dam, the Isser of Dam, it says in the Torah clearly regarding behemoths, oifis, and a chai is included in that as well. And then there's a tzad hashove, or actually a klala prata klal. This is a Gemara in Krisus, as Rashi quotes here. There's a klala prata klal that you learn out that it applies to other things as well. The Isser of Dam, that is. And Ravidi Baravin said that it applies to a koi. That even a koi, the blood of a koi is aser. That af kol asuya koi comes to add a koi. So now the question is, if a koi v'i koi, that a Bach adds here, v'i koi sveikuhu, if a koi is a suffix chaya or suffix behemah, it's the kral rabuya sveike. Do you need a pasuk to be marbe the koi, which is a suffix chaya or suffix behemah? The dam is obviously going to be aser. Why do you need a pasuk for that? Ella, so therefore this proves to you that Beria, that the Ella Beria Shani. It's a different Beria for itself, and therefore it's different. So therefore you need a special pasuk to say that the blood is also. It's not a Chai, it's not a Behemah, it's a Beria for itself. So Hanami, Beria Shani. Koi is a Beria for itself, and therefore you need a special pasuk to aser the Chaylev. Now the Gemara comes back to the source for the very Isser of V'nisam es nafshe or Ta'ano es nafshe regarding where is the source Minatayra for this Indian of the Isser Achilu Shtiya, that is Isser Karas for this. Never says clearly in the Torah that express the Isser of Achilu Shtiya and Yom Kippur. So Tan Rabbanon, we learned in Abraisa. What it does say in the Torah is Ta'ano es nafshe. You shouldn't bring infliction to your souls on Yom Kippur. So what is that? Yachel, I would think what that means is literally Yeshiv B'chama, sit in the sun where it's very hot and it causes a v'nisa and pain. Oy b'tzina, or sit out in the cold. Kadei sheyitztay, so you should feel the pain of the cold. Talmud loymar, so the pasuk over there also says v'chol malacha loisaso. You're not allowed to work on Yom Kippur. And we compare the two. Ma malacha, just like when it comes to work, what is the Torah saying? Shev al tasa. That's the Torah saying refrain from an action. Don't work. Af inui nefesh, so too when it says inui nefesh, what does it mean? Shev al tasa. It's referring to something where you have to refrain. Don't do. Don't eat. That's what it refers to. But not taking an action and going ahead, sitting in the sun or sitting in the cold to bring yourself to pain. But even regarding sitting in the sun or sitting in the cold, it could also be in a situation where there's a lack of action. Maybe I should say, if a person is sitting in the sun, the Bach changes this and says, and he's hot, we're not going to tell him, get up and go to the shade to get some cold, to be able to get out of the heat. In other words, in a case where a person is already in the sun. So maybe V'nisam es nafshe seichem is saying that he has to stay there in the sun, shev al tasa, and not he shouldn't go out into the shade. Or in the reverse, Yosef betula v'karele, a person that's in the shade and he's cold. Le'nemele kum suv b'shimshe. We're not going to tell him to get up and go to the sun. He has to sit there, shev al tasa, sit there and remain in the cold. So we see that this could also be in a case of shev al tasa. So maybe that's what to anos nafshe seichem means. So the Gemara says no. We're comparing it to malacha and it's still not compared. Dumye the malacha. Ma malacha, just like the isser of not doing malacha, lo chilakta ba. There is no differences. The Torah is saying refrain from work. And in every situation, it's a shev al tasa. Af inui, so too when the Torah says ta'ana es nafshe seichem, lo tachloik bay. The Torah is saying a shev al tasa in all situations. If it's about sitting in the sun or sitting in the shade where it's cold, so then sometimes it's a shev al tasa, sometimes it's a kum v'aseh. Depends if you're already in the place of pain, in the sun or in the cold, or not. So therefore, that's a case where there could be a difference. So we're comparing it to malacha, where there's no difference. So the chiyuv of ta'anos nafshe seichem is always a situation which is a shev al tasa, and therefore it refers to not eating and not drinking. The Gemara will soon explain how we know it doesn't refer to other things. There could also be a shev al tasa. Let's see. There's another brayse the Gemara quotes here. Tanya, so it says in another brayse, ta'anos nafshe seichem, yochel yeshiv b'chama betzina v'itzdar. You should sit yourself in the sun or in the cold and have pain that way. Talmud loymat, so the pasuk compares it to what it says, V'chol malacha loisas, ma malacha dov shechayav alav b'makom acher. So just like when it comes to a malacha, you're not allowed to do on Yom Kippur, what is the Torah referring to? What type of malacha? A malacha that's asr, or that there's a chiyuv kares in another place as well, on Shabbos. So over here as well, the malacha refers similar to Shabbos, not to do those malachas. So too, af inui nefesh, so too, and it says here, the inui of the affliction upon your soul, shechayav alav b'makom acher. That's referring to something that you find the chiyuv of kares in another place. Ve'ezeh, what kind of issa do you find the chiyuv of kares in another place? Ve'ezeh pigel. That refers to pigel v'naisar. Pigel and naisar, if you eat them, there's a chiyuv kares. So therefore we know that it refers to not eating pigel and naisar on Yom Kippur. Frag the Gemara or the Braise, Avi Pigel v'Noisa Shein B'Kares. So maybe the Isser of not eating a Yom Kippur only refers to Pigel and Noisa that are Chi of Kares. V'lo Yavi is a Tevel, and there's no Isser not to eat Tevel on Yom Kippur Shein B'Kares, where there is no Chi of Kares. Tevel is just a chiyuv misa min hashemayim, I believe. So therefore, maybe that is not included in the isser of eating on Yom Kippur. Talmud Loimar. So when the Torah says the isser of Yom Kippur, ta'anu, it says twice. Ta'anu, one time it says ta'anu es nafshei seichem, but then it says again, v'nisem es nafshei seichem. Riba. So that adds that it includes everything, even the tevel. But now, ovia tevel, maybe it only includes not to eat the pigel, noiser, and tevel, shu b'misa. So tevel, yes, is misa. V'loyavias ha-nevela she'ena b'misa. And maybe it does not include the isser of nevela, where there's no chiyuv of misa at all. So maybe that's a kind of achila that the Torah does not include. Again, we say the same thing. Talmud Loimet ta'anu v'yinisem es nafshei seichem riba. So that shows that the Torah is marba everything. Obvious on nevela, I would think maybe it only includes nevela, which is a shu b'lav. There's an isser of a lav in that. V'lo obvious a chulin sheinin b'lav, and it shouldn't include chulin, which is not a lav at all. You can eat any of the chulin, so maybe that's not included in the isser or the chiyuv of tanas nafshei seichem. Talmud Loimet ta'anu v'yinisem es nafshei seichem riba. It adds and says that it includes even eating any foods of chulin. Ovia chulin, so maybe that only includes chulin. She'enan bekom echayil, where a person doesn't have an obligation to eat the chulin, it's just in his choice if he wants to eat it or not. V'loyavies hatrume shehi bekom echayil, and who says this includes trume, that is bekom echayil. You have a mitzvah to eat the trume, so maybe that would be allowed to be eaten on Yom Kippur. Talmud Loimet ta'anu v'yisnisem v'snafshei seichem riba. So that tells me that you chayiv even for the trume. Obvious hatrume she'ena beval tesiru. Maybe it only includes eating trume, where there is no set time when you have to eat the trume. It's a mitzvah to eat it, but there is no set time. Whereas v'loyavias hakotchim, I will not include kotchim she'en beval tesiru, where there's a set time until when you have to eat it. You're not allowed to leave it over. So maybe for that you would be allowed to eat it on Yom Kippur. Again, Talmud Loimet ta'anu v'yinisem es nafshei seichem riba. The Torah writes these two lashonos of ta'anu and v'yinisem to let me know that you're chayiv for both of them, and it doesn't make any difference. Any kind of food you eat on Yom Kippur, you would be chayiv. But still, even after the Gemara says that you're going to be chayiv for any kind of food, how do we know that it refers to eating foods? The basis of all of this is because we're comparing it to the fact that we find in another place that there's an isser of eating, that there's a chiyuv of kares. That's how we know that it refers to eating. But now the Braisa concludes and says, V'im nafshach loimar. Now if you're going to want to say that this is not a good source, Harei oimar, I'll have another source for you. The Torah says, V'havadeti es hanefesh hahi, that the one that will eat in Yom Kippur, so V'havadeti es hanefesh hahi, his soul will be lost. So what do I learn from this? Inoi shehu avedas hanefesh. What kind of affliction is the Torah referring to? Something that is a loss of your life. What is that? Ve'ezezeh, zeh achilu shtiyah. That refers to eating and drinking. If a person doesn't eat and drink, so then he can't live. Till here is the Braisa. So now the Gemara asks, what does the Braisa mean? Mai ve'im nafshach loima. When the Braisa says if the first source that we brought, when it says ta'anu ve'inisem, if that's not enough of a source that we compared it to pigel and naisa, that it refers to eating food, so we have another source. Why would the first source not be a good source? Because if you'll argue and say, ba'arayis komishtoikra, maybe when the Torah says ta'anu v'yinisem, maybe it's referring to the isser of arayis. That's what I'm comparing it to. It's also an inui, right? Because the Torah, you find also by arayis that it's an isser of kares. So if we're looking to compare to another case where there's an isser of kares, so maybe it's not referring to achila, which I find by pigel v'naisa is a chi of kares. Maybe it's referring to this of arayis where there's a chi of kares. So therefore, it brings another source that harei oime v'avatis hanefesh inu sheyesh ba'avedis nefesh ve'ezezeh achilu shtiyah. So therefore, we have another source that it refers specifically to eating and drinking because there's a loss of the person's life if he doesn't eat and drink. Now there's another source, according to a different opinion. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana. Rabbi Shmuel says, Nema kan inui. The Torah here uses the term inui. V'nema la'alan, and there's another place, and this is by the man. The Torah uses the term inui, as Rashi brings vayancha v'yarivecha. Ma la'alan inui re'ova, and just like there, the affliction was the hunger that the Yidden were claiming and saying that they're hungry because they only have the man. Afkan inui re'oven. Here as well, it refers to the affliction of hunger. That's how we know it refers to not eating. Fact the Gemara, according to this opinion, v'neilef, why can't we learn out the language of inui from another place? Me'im ta'ana as benoisai. What Lavan said to Yaakov, if you will bring affliction to my daughters, and that refers to marital relations, ta'arayas. So maybe over here as well, it refers to the Isser of Arayas. So the Gemara answers, no, Donin Inui derabim mi Inui derabim. We learn out the expression of Inui that it says there Yom Kippur regarding Rabim, regarding all Yidden, from the expression of Inui Vayancha Vayarivecha that it says by the Mon regarding all Yidden. Vein Donin Inui derabim Inui deyachid. We don't learn out the expression of Inui here from the Inui that it says by Lavan, which is speaking about one individual for Yaakov. Fragt the Gemara, there's another place. V'neilif mini de Mitzrayim. Why don't we learn out the Inui that it says by Yom Kippur from the expression that it says when the Yidden were in Mitzrayim? The Chsiv there it says, Vayar esanyenu, the Eibishter saw our affliction, V'amrinon, and we darshan on that pasuk. What is it referring to? Zuprishis derech eretz. This refers also to marital relations that they were separated from their wives. So maybe that's what it refers to here. Ella, the Gemara gives a different answer. Donin inui bidei shemayim. We learn out the inui of Yom Kippur, which is a mitzvah. As Rashi says, mitzvah hamelech. So it's an inui bidei shemayim that the Eibusha requires. Mi inui bidei shemayim. From the inui that it says by the man, which was also something that was brought from the Eibusha. Vein donin inui bidei shemayim. We don't learn out the inui bidei shemayim, inui bidei adam. From the inui by Mitzrayim that was brought through parai, through a human being. So therefore we learn it out. This is the source that we learn it out from what it says, dafke from the inui by food, and which is bidei shemayim and not bidei adam. Okay, the Gemara here, once it brought up the inyan of the man, it's going to go into a whole inyan of in connection to the man. We'll see in Mitzvah tomorrow, the continuation.